We are in quite a strong position now with this financing in place, and I think with that strategic project status, we're in a really strong position to build some momentum as we move towards construction.
Hello and welcome to the Assay TV. Today I am very happy to be joined by Sean Gregory, Managing Director at Sarytogan Graphite. So Sean, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Hello, Amy. I'm delighted to join you on the Assay for the first time, and really looking forward to working with you with all of our news over the next year or so.
Absolutely, same here. And Sarytogan Graphite is a relatively new company for the Assay. So maybe we can just start with a quick introduction to your company, and you can talk a little bit about your flagship graphite project in central Kazakhstan.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Look, Sarytogan Graphite, we're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. We IPO'd the company in 2022 on the back of what we now know to be the world's second largest and the world's highest grade graphite JORC resource. Now, with those exciting beginnings, we set about developing the project and went through all of the necessary steps with drilling and resource upgrades, and really culminated in the publication of the pre-feasibility study on the project. Now, the pre-feasibility study outlined the development strategy for the project, which is to build a 50,000 tonne per annum concentrator to produce concentrates for industrial customers, to purify that graphite to 5 nines purity for advanced battery uses. So look, that's the introduction. We're located, of course, in Kazakhstan, which we find to be a very favourable jurisdiction for mining.
All right, excellent. And so, as you mentioned, at the graphite project, you've had a PFS out already. Where is the company currently focused with regards to this project? What kind of plans do you have underway?
Yeah, so now with the outcome of the pre-feasibility study, and especially when we compare some of the fundamental metrics of our project to other graphite projects on the Australian Stock Exchange, we see a number of really interesting things. We see our operating costs being a lot lower than most other flake graphite projects. And in fact, when we compare it to Chinese production, about US $250 per tonne production, our production is about US $270 per tonne. Most other graphite hopefuls on the ASX are about $450. So with that confidence, and despite the difficult market conditions in graphite more broadly, we very much formed a view to charge forward with the definitive feasibility study on the project. Now, that work has been underway over the last 9 months or so, with collecting all of the necessary data in terms of an infill drilling program, metallurgical variability test work, environmental baseline studies, engineering surveys, collecting that raw data, a transport study, a power study, and so forth. And all of these activities are what we call early works for the DFS. And now that we've just agreed to issue new shares to a new investor coming in with $3.6 million, and in fact, we're also working with our major shareholder, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, to top up their investment as well. With all of that funding, we are now in a very strong position, and very shortly we will be awarding the main engineering contracts for the DFS proper. Now, our schedule has this completing in mid-2026, ahead of construction in 2027. So it's a really exciting time for the company as we emerge out of that, malaise of the so-called Lassonde curve, the initial excitement of the IPO, the hard work with all of the studies that I've just mentioned, and now coming out the other side with a pathway towards production. It's quite an exciting time at Sarytogan Graphite.
Okay, excellent. And so, as you mentioned, back in August, you received this $3.6 million private placement. How well funded is the company now? Are you going to be looking for further investment to move forward with the DFS and other plans?
Yeah, look, I think it's worth touching on our shareholding structure. which is very strong for a junior company. Our top three shareholders together own more than half of the company. They include our founder, geologist Dr. Waldemar Muller. They include the new investor, a fellow from Kazakhstan with the $3.6 million investment that is currently working towards completion. And perhaps most importantly and most strategically, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So look, they came on board about this time last year with a $5 million investment. And as I mentioned, they intend to follow their money with a further top-up investment to match Mr. Sarsenov, who brought the 3.6. But that European strategic investment is now coming with even more credentials. In May of this year, we attained strategic project status with the European Union under their Critical Raw Materials Act. We are one of only 13 projects located outside of Europe to attain that status. And through that process, we expect opportunities not only with the likes of EBRD, but with other funding institutes and research institutes throughout Europe. So look, we are in quite a strong position now with this financing in place, and I think with that strategic project status, we're in a really strong position to build some momentum as we move towards construction.
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, graphite has been, one of these kind of key critical metals that have been gathering a lot of interest lately. And so, how are you finding demand, pricing, all of that for graphite? Is it coming through kind of the EU and their renewed focus, as well as in the US, you're seeing this giant renewed focus for critical minerals and kind of onshoring materials. So, what kind of dynamics are you noticing in the market right now?
Look, it is a really fascinating market. So there's a number of things to unpick there. Firstly, with this question of critical raw materials, the point that I always make is that there is no raw material more critical than graphite. 70% of the world's graphite mining is done in China, and almost 100% of the world's anodes for lithium-ion batteries are made in China. So that does create this geopolitical concern where many other Western jurisdictions are looking to secure their supply, and hence our nomination as a strategic project in the EU. And also, of course, the dynamic in the US with tariffs mounting up on these types of commodities. And at last report, the total number of tariffs being applied to Chinese graphite stack up to about 160%. So that certainly is going to make it easier for non-Chinese projects to get into the market. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, in terms of non-Chinese projects, we have a bona fide claim to having the lowest operating cost to make concentrate out of any of the published studies on any graphite projects coming to production. Now, in terms of why isn't that translating through to graphite pricing, and more importantly for your viewers and investors, stock pricing for graphite companies? Well, look, we have enjoyed some, love in the market over the last 3 months or so with our share price kicking up. But to be frank, we're still very much undervalued, with a market capitalisation that we feel has got the opportunity to multiply many, many times from where we are now. So that, investor interest in graphite and specifically graphite pricing is actually held back by the synthetic graphite production currently underway in China. If we go back 4 or 5 years ago, we found that the graphite mix going into batteries was around about a 60-40 split between synthetic and natural graphite. But with the enormous upshift in demand, which is real. The year-on-year growth of Chinese anode production is about 35% year on year. That demand has been met by more and more synthetic graphite projects being turned on. Now, that's been quite a useful stopgap and a short-term solution for the market. However, the longest-term solution in terms of lower cost graphite, higher performing graphite, and more environmentally conscious graphite, the natural choice, natural graphite, that now needs to come in and fill that production with the better solution. It takes time, though, of course, to bring mines to production, and it takes time to qualify to meet the requirements of battery producers. Now, we're well on that journey, and we really see that as an opportunity to grab a bigger slice of a pie that's rapidly growing. So it really puts the opportunity for, I think, share price appreciation driven by graphite demand, driven by graphite pricing, to actually be turbocharged for those reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we should see kind of growing demand from global projects and global companies that are operating kind of outside of China as kind of geopolitics continues to reign over the industry. And so I wanted to look at operating in Kazakhstan, which you already spoke a little bit about, but there is an enormous mix of both majors and juniors that are already operating in the region. So it is quite a favorable mining jurisdiction. Can you talk a little bit more about, what investors should know about getting involved in projects there?
Yeah, look, we're certainly couldn't be happier operating in Kazakhstan. And it certainly is a question that I think a lot of investors, rightly so, rightly ask, in that they may not necessarily be familiar with Kazakhstan as a jurisdiction. And indeed, when I embarked on this journey 4 years ago, I certainly had those concerns myself. But I've got to say, I've been so pleasantly surprised operating in Kazakhstan. Look, the photograph behind me, my background there, that's the city of Astana, which is the capital of Kazakhstan. And this city has sprung up over the last 15 years in the middle of the steppe from nothing. So it's really the most modern city that you'll see anywhere in the world. And Almaty is also a beautiful historic city. Moving into the mining industry, look, they've got a very well-established mining industry. They produce 40% of the world's uranium. They have very large oil fields. Chevron invested $20 billion in an oil development there 4 or 5 years ago. You have all of the majors up there exploring for copper and gold mineralisation. And you've got a very favourable and supportive government. And we've found that very, very strongly, particularly as our project is so strategic for Kazakhstan. And in fact, it puts Kazakhstan up in lights on the global stage with things like this strategic project nomination. And indeed, our project was also mentioned on the sidelines of the United Nations in New York in November last year as an exemplar of how quasi-government institutions like EBRD can support up-and-coming critical raw materials projects. And Sarytogan was highlighted as the exemplar project. So we see that. So for those reasons, the government is very supportive. And in terms of getting all of the necessary approvals and tenement grants and so forth that we need, we've already achieved our mining licence. We've already achieved the environmental permit for the mine. And look, their system, it's actually modelled off the West Australian Mining Act, which is one that I'm deeply familiar with. And it certainly gives me a lot of confidence. Now, moving away from the political scene, but into actually the industrial scene, we've then got the cost base of Kazakhstan, which is truly remarkable. And in fact, there's an infographic on our website of the copper mines globally. And Kazakhstan features with 4 out of the 5 lowest cost copper mines globally. Now, the big ones are in Chile, of course, but the ones in Kazakhstan are very, very profitable. Yes, there's the physical attributes of the deposits themselves, but also the input costs are very low. Low cost diesel. Diesel is available on the side of the road for about 50 cents a litre. Power is available for about 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. Skilled labour is available at a lower cost than in Australia, for example, and all of those benefits that put those copper projects at the top of the tree globally are also flowing through our studies into our graphite project. And to be frank, I think we can probably even do a bit better in the definitive feasibility study as we get down to local pricing rather than estimates. We may well see some additional benefits start to flow through. So for all of those reasons, Amy, we look at Kazakhstan not as a risk, not as an investment risk. We look at Kazakhstan as our biggest opportunity. And in fact, it is our sustainable competitive advantage, our ability to move around Kazakhstan and take advantage of these opportunities. There aren't too many listed opportunities like Sarytogan that are so deeply embedded in the Kazakhstan mining culture.
All right, excellent. And so just to start to wrap it up, you've had some really exciting news coming out this week with regards to your copper project. So can you share a little bit of details there?
Yeah, look, very happy to, Amy. And look, as we progress with the assay, I'm hopeful to do interviews each time we have some new news. But of course, for Sarytogan, the focus had to start on our world-class graphite project. But investors should also know that, and for those reasons I just described, the fact that we are deeply embedded in Kazakhstan, we do have the ability to peg tenements and explore them. We have done exactly that. So we have some secondary projects in copper exploration that we pegged last year, and we've taken from very much a greenfields opportunity. We've done the aeromag, we've done the soil sampling, we've identified some anomalies. And this week, we're delighted to announce that it's now time to drill test the first of those anomalies. So this anomaly is called Ilken. It's actually named after one of our geologists on the site. And it is within the Baynazar copper project. It's a copper porphyry target. We do have soil sample anomalies there of up to 1,000 parts per million. That is coincident with a circular aeromagnetic feature, which could very well indicate a porphyry intrusion. And we have a trench there with mineralisation up around 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 copper in places. There's a historical drill hole there as well, but the historical drill hole, the information on it is a little bit sketchy, but certainly there was long intersections of 0.1 copper and the hole ended in mineralisation. Now, from that exciting target, it goes undercover. And this drill program is designed to test what's under the cover. Now, this isn't going to be the big 500-metre discovery hole, but what we're aiming to do, this is using a drill method called KGK drilling, which is a inexpensive drilling method that can penetrate through the weathered material and the transported material to tag the bedrock. And we'll do that at a reasonably close spacing, and based on that, we will sharpen up these anomalies. Rather than being soil anomalies and aeromagnetic features, they'll be bedrock anomalies, which will then be ripe for drill testing with a diamond drill rig next year. So it's the logical next step in the generation of those projects, and an exciting time for investors. I've got to say, in this game, Amy, the best announcements I've ever done have been drill rig arriving on site. People love to get excited about that and the unlimited potential in front of us.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll definitely have to keep catching up as more developments come to light on both of these projects. But just to wrap it up, Do you want to share any upcoming milestones, key news that we should be on the lookout for in the coming months?
Yeah, look, Amy, there's plenty of news coming from Saratoga. Obviously, now with this cash coming in, we're flush to invest, and with that investment comes lots of news. There's still investment coming from the work we did earlier in the season as well. We did infill drilling at the Saratogan deposit early in the season in around May, and those assays aren't far away. And investors can expect those long high-grade assays that we've become accustomed to at Saratogan. They'll be coming. That'll flow through to an upgrade to the resource. We'll also be shortly announcing the appointment of our engineering contractor for the definitive feasibility study and their expertise. And then, of course, there's these copper drilling results. There'll be metallurgical test work, and there's also the work going in the background, which is continuous. And unfortunately, we can't say too much until it's done. But we're always working in the background on customer discussions towards offtake. And while obviously I can't say anything until it's done, but we are continuing discussions with many potential off-takers, and that could lead to some very exciting news. And then on the financing side as well, with EBRD by our side, we're moving towards the funding necessary post DFS as well. So, look, I think there's a lot of news coming, and I'm really looking forward to sitting down with you quite regularly as this news comes out and updating our shareholders and investors.
Absolutely. And we definitely look forward to catching up again soon. And Sean, it's great to have yourself and the Saratogan team on for the assay, and we look forward to hearing more updates soon.
Thank you, Amy. Pleasure to meet you.